Hey everyone, welcome to Dungeon Brew. I am John, and I'm going to be talking to you today about world building. I do not have my counterpart because I'm going to be talking to you about the way that I do world building. And even though we have done an entire series, Joshua and I, about world building, we both approach it in different ways. And because of that, we thought it would be helpful to actually see some practical approaches to the way that we actually handle world building on our own, because the way that he approaches it and the way that I approach it are so different in a lot of ways. Hey, post video editing John here. One of the things that I wanted to cut in real quick and say was that my approach versus Joshua's approach versus anyone else's approach, this is a preference type thing. You may not prefer the way that I do world building. You may not prefer the way that Joshua does world building. You may have your own method altogether, but one thing that I do want to point out is that you kind of don't know what you don't know. And so it's very helpful sometimes to just consider the other approaches to see what options are available to you as you begin your world building processes and determine if those are going to be beneficial to you. And sometimes what is helpful is identifying the things that are not beneficial to you, or identifying the ways that you don't want to approach a project. And so at the very least, even if you end up not liking the way that I handle world building, or even the way that Joshua does world building, I think that you're going to find that you have learned something through the process of watching many of these videos to figure out what you don't want to do. So I'm going to go through some of the things that I built before. I'm going to show you examples of things that I built. I'm going to actually bust out some documents and some tables and other things like that that I use, and we'll go through and do some actual world building together. If you would like to participate in that world building process, by all means, leave comments down below, that type of thing, suggestions. At some point in the future, if there's enough activity, we might even look at doing some streams where we do some practical world building together using the methods that I use. But for the purposes of this video, I just kind of want to talk about my general approach and the way that I have always handled world building for not only the games that I run, but also for the worlds that I built together with my brother, and we've written books together where we've done world building, all kinds of things like that. And my approach has remained pretty standard since the time that I was in my early teens, about 25 years ago, when I first started doing world building. So the nuts and bolts of it is I start from maps. I don't generally start from other sources. I'll get inspired by things and I'll wrap in other things, but I start from maps, and I have always begun my approach with world building based off of a map. Most of the time, the ones that really excite me are the maps that I make myself, or the maps that I tweak or change or affect in some way to make them unique to what it is that I'm interested in. And I've done this in a few different ways. I've hand-drawn maps. The first several maps that I made of the worlds that I created were all hand-drawn, but I'm not an artist by any means, so they weren't very good. And from there, I went into creating maps using GIMP as a program, and I basically created random fog fields and then created height maps, and then used the height maps to create the illusion of depth. And then I use those depth maps in order to assign things like mountains and hills and oceans, and then I eventually would build out the entire map using that method. I've also used Asgard's program, and all of these things I'm sure will have either images or links or a combination of those so you can see what I'm referencing. But Asgard's is very useful. I actually used a height map that I created in GIMP in order to create my own map in that, and then I expanded it beyond what it originally was. I've used unique maps that I've created solely in Asgard's, and it's a very, very useful tool because it allows you to do a lot of the assigning of names and locations, regions, all kinds of stuff like that. And it's very helpful because it has things like assigning names that fall into a specific type of culture. So you can find English names and Welsh names and German names and things like that, so that you can keep consistency between different nations or different regions and that type of stuff. It's very agnostic in terms of what it is that you're including in there. So you can go full high fantasy building that, or you can go science fiction or whatever it is that you want to do. And then I've also used WonderDraft, and WonderDraft is currently kind of what I've been invested in terms of building, because there's a lot more ease of control when it comes to the shape of the world, which is something that I very much enjoy messing with. But ultimately what it comes down to is every time that I start world building, I always start from the map. This is something for me that is inspiring because I get to fill in the blank corners of the map. And more importantly, there are blank portions of the map that I never fill in, and I like having the blank spaces on the map. It is the absence of things that I feel like make particularly fantasy so interesting, because if every corner of the map is filled in, there's not really anything for the players to explore, and there's not anything for me to explore as a game master or as an author, because I already know what's there, and I don't like already knowing what's there. I want to be able to explore it at the same time as my players. So if there's a blank spot on a map, or I've put in some random something that I'm like, I don't know what it is, I kind of came up with an idea, then I have the opportunity to explore it at the same time as my players, or I have the opportunity to explore it as I'm writing about it. And those things together combined, all of those, synonyms, all those things together combined, create for me a source of inspiration when it comes to actually building a world. So this is kind of a cheat. If you've viewed our world building series, there are two videos. One of them has to do with inspiration, one of them has to do with geography, and my inspiration is the geography in a lot of ways. Other people are going to approach this in other ways. Other people are going to approach their inspiration in different ways, and that can be from a narrative point of view, it can be from a character point of view, it can be even from like a divine or a religious point of view. It can have to do with like the creation of the world, is the inspiration that gets them to the place to start building it, or it can be about specific cultures or specific peoples that, or even individuals that make them want to imagine what the world is like. So I would say something like Harry Potter is an individual-based world creation. The character drives the plot and drives the creation of the world, and so you get to see the world through the creation of that, or through following the journey of an individual. Something like Middle-earth and Tolkien is more of a world that is created through that. It was spawned out of The Hobbit, obviously. So The Hobbit follows a journey through a mysterious world, and what occurred in the world was something that, from what I understand, was kind of made up as Tolkien made it up as he followed it along and followed the journey of Bilbo. And then you started to get into a place of the creation of the world via the Silmarillion, via the ideas that certain things happened in the history, and it almost has the religious / divine style inspiration. The world, the map itself, was never as big for Tolkien, I don't feel like, as it is for other authors. The world was something that kind of came to be as a result of other events, rather than the world existing and then events occurring around them. So I'm just kind of talking about those because I want to provide the contrast for your starting point and what it does for your world creation. If you are interested in creating a world in which you don't necessarily have the answers at the beginning or even the end of the world creation process, then that's the journey that I tend to take. I find it interesting because that, I feel like, mirrors our own world. If we look at our own history, we know certain things about our past. We have a very good idea of the events of history for the past several hundred years, and as you go backwards in time, it gets foggier and foggier and foggier. 1,000 years ago, we still have records, we know a lot of what happens. There are experts in this area, but it becomes foggier for the layman. And then when you get back even farther, you start getting beyond the stretch of the ability to record history via writing implementation. You have oral histories, and that's why we don't have very much history going into places like Britain or other areas of the world like the Incas. These areas that did not have a written history, it's very difficult for us to understand exactly what brought them to that place. And for me, that seems closer to our history, and it makes it easier for me to build the world coming from a perspective of geology and time. Look at the world. The world was created. Where did the plates move? The tectonic plates move? How were the mountains formed? How were the rivers formed? Where did the oceans fill in? Where did people populate? Because these were the areas that were available to them. And then how did their particular location in the world influence the way that they developed culturally, they interacted with other peoples, the strife that they particularly participated in that eventually led them to a certain place. What are areas of the map that were never accessible because the plates moved and it separated a people from one another? This is the kind of thing that you can look at if you're interested in looking at the broader scope of history for humanity, you know, tens of thousands of years, and kind of the way that we eventually developed into the people that we are. And that tends to be where I focus, is going, okay, let's start imagining what happened there, and then eventually we get to a place where somebody has begun to record history orally, someone has begun to write for the first time, and history becomes recorded. And then we end up with a world, to me, that is interesting, that I want to explore, and I want to explore with others. Alright, so that's all I've got for today. I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of where it was that I was coming from for the world building series. This is going to be the way that I probably explore this video series as I go through, and I talk about some of the worlds that I built, and then probably participate in some actual world building as we explore the way that these things kind of come together. I find it very interesting to allow randomness to take its course and then try and fill in the blanks or try to explain how the randomness came to be, because that's kind of very human to me, that we want to look for answers and we want to explain things. And if we start from a place of randomness that we arguably came from to begin with, it just feels more natural that way. Alright, so I will see you guys all in the next video.
Judge